Welcome to our webinar today. I am Judy Browse. I'm the Executive Director of NAAEE, and I am so happy to see all of you here today to find out more about emotional intelligence and what does it mean for our work and our lives. And we had a lot of interest in this topic. And I don't know if that means that you all don't have any emotional intelligence or if you just need some guidance on what this is all about. I think we all do. And Anne, we're so excited that you'll be helping us dig into emotional intelligence, what it is, how it can help us with our work and our personal lives as well, because it's really so important for us to think about kind of the emotional side of what we do and all that that entails. And I know you have a lot of info for us. And for those of you who do know a lot, please put comments in the chat. We want to hear from all of you because we know a lot of you do have a lot of experience about why emotional intelligence or your emotional IQ matter. And we are so thrilled to have Anne with us. And I'll introduce her more formally in a minute. Just a few housekeeping tips so that everyone who is joining knows how Zoom works and how they can communicate with us. But I just want to say, for those of you who have not been on an NAAEE webinar, we are trying to bring new ideas and insights to the field of really trying to bring speakers and subjects and topics that not only fit with environmental educators, but related fields and the work that we all are doing. So that's what we're trying to do every month with our webinars. And we're so excited to have partnership with, first of all, the Forest Service with these EE Inspire webinars. And the Forest Service is such a great partner, and we are trying to spark innovation in environmental education. And I just want to thank Heidi McAllister and Melissa Taggart. Many of you know both of them, who have been working in conservation education for many years. And Melissa used to work at NAAEE with me and Anne and Carrie, and they're both fantastic. And I also want to thank our affiliate co-hosts for all the work they do in states, regions, and provinces across North America to advance environmental education. And if you want to find out more, go to our website. And a big thank you to E360 Plus, which is our partnership with US EPA on educator training and how to strengthen the field of environmental education, including offering these webinars monthly. And again, everybody is muted. It is a webinar. You can type in questions and resources in the chat. We are recording this webinar, and you'll be able to get a chance to hear the recording and get a copy of the slides. And we do have closed captioning. And so for those of you who would like closed captioning, just see the CC at the bottom, click on that, and you can also see the chat. You can also see that there are reactions that you can send throughout the webinar, and you can pick on closed captioning, 31 different options, and hopefully your language is there, and it can help you better understand what we're doing. Okay, thank you to Carrie. Carrie does so much to help these webinars come alive. So Carrie, thank you so much for everything that you do. Carrie is our communications and data specialist and helps on so many things related to communications in NAAEE and the field. And it is such a pleasure to work with you, Carrie. And I now want to introduce our guest speaker, Anne Umali. I'm just so thrilled that Anne is here with us because she brings so many years of experience. And as many of you know, Anne used to work at NAAEE, and we are just so thrilled to have you back here for this webinar. And I have been super lucky to work with Anne for 18 years. This might be going on 19 years. We're both getting old, Anne. But Anne is amazing. And those of you who know Anne know that she is an excellent facilitator, leadership development coach, and she works at the Training Resources Group, TRG. She worked at NAAEE, she worked at Cornell, she worked at the Field Museum, she worked at the National Audubon Society. Just couldn't have a better person to cover this topic. So Anne, thank you for being with us, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Welcome.
Thank you so much for that, Judy. And thank you, Carrie, for all of your back-end support too. And it really is a homecoming. It feels like, in a way. Judy did say that we've known each other for 18 years, and we probably worked together for 17 and a half of those years. So it's pretty incredible, our learning journey together. So I will share my slides here if I can. And just want to start off with a cartoon because I know how much Judy loves cartoons, and Judy, you're my inspiration for a lot of this, a lot of these slides. So before we dive into all things emotional intelligence, we are going to be talking about emotions and feelings, and wanted to see if you all just want to do a quick check-in with yourself right now and let us know, what emoji best captures your mood right now. And if you've got the latest version of Zoom, you can use emojis in the chat. Oh, I'm getting some thoughtful expressions, some chill sunglasses. Nice, nice. Let's see, getting some rainbows. Oh, Jillian's got a cold. I hope you're feeling okay, Jillian. Sarah, we've got some, some sad faces and some tired emojis and some crazy eyes. So very, very cool. Please keep thinking about, how are you doing right now as you are going through and hearing about emotional intelligence. We're going to have lots of opportunities to keep checking in with ourselves as we think about this work. So thank you for playing. We're going to keep going. And we are going to be talking about emotional intelligence, but I want to hear from all of you first before we get started about your own definitions of, how are you thinking about emotional intelligence? What does it mean to you? How are you defining it in your own words? So moving from emojis to text now in the chat. Laura's adding, emotional intelligence is the ability to regulate our emotions. Thank you, Laura. Midori is adding, being able to understand. That's right. So it's not just regulating, but your ability to understand how it is you're feeling. Good, good. Jacinta's giving us a contented face. Thank you, Jacinta. And Mawada's adding, being in tune with other people's body language. Very cool. Okay, so we've got some folks that are thinking about internally themselves, and Mawada's actually thinking outside perspective, thinking about other people's body language. Jessica is also saying, reading others. Camila's adding, being able to identify and voice your emotions. Yes, identifying, naming, we're going to be talking all about that. Really good. And I love what Erin added about, knowing how to portray appropriate emotions for the situation. So you all are getting really deep into these definitions of emotional intelligence. And I love how you're being really nuanced in your definition. So keep those comments coming. And I'm going to just highlight one more that Zayetsi is saying about, it is about accepting our own feelings and being okay with that. Great. Well, keep the words coming. And I just want to offer up a working definition for us to use that is attempting to encapsulate all of those suggestions that you offered up just now. And it is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage emotions, and not only ourselves, but also in others. So a lot of you noticed that. A lot of you mentioned that piece about naming, about understanding, but also managing. And many of you noted the ability to notice what's going on internally, as well as the importance of what's going on externally. So you all have done this before, and I can know that we can count on a lot of you to be able to share your own experiences. So thank you for that. So we're going to keep going. And before we dive into the content, I wanted to share this graphic that I really like. It's from the Junto Institute, and it does a really good job of portraying this, broad spectrum of emotions. And so it really digs into sort of like the spectrum of intensity. Do you feel things really deeply and intensely and hardly? that spectrum versus emotions on that spectrum of positivity, feel good emotions, and emotions that are a little bit more unpleasant, negative. So I show this because, part of building that emotional intelligence is connected to how we talk about it. What language do we have available to us? How are we building that emotional literacy by the words that we use and the nuance that we can have to name how we're feeling and name what we're seeing in others. So we're going to come back to this a little bit later, but just wanted to show you that there is a broad spectrum of emotions out there. And I want us to challenge ourselves a little bit to push ourselves to use language that's a little bit more nuanced so that we can better describe and tap into what it is that we're actually thinking and feeling. Okay. All right, so let's keep going. We're gonna have one last cartoon for all of you. And this is this robot talking to another robot saying, your feelings may be artificial, but that doesn't mean they're not real. So this is just an acknowledgement that your feelings are absolutely real, validating your feelings. But what emotional intelligence is, it's not only the validation piece, but it is the magic of what you do with that information, right? So feelings are data points, they're real. We're not here to say or downplay that these feelings aren't real or what you're feeling is good or bad. Your feelings are real, but what we're going to talk about is what you do with it, how you manage those feelings, how you interpret them, how you process them is where the magic is. Okay. Yes, Colleen, this does also make me think of the Murder Bot series. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so what we have planned for today is we're going to do three things. We're going to first dig into all the various competencies of emotional intelligence. And so this model I'm going to share gets into a bit of the sort of like the buckets of mastery that we can all have when it comes to emotional intelligence and all the skills that are related to these competencies. So we'll talk a little bit about skills and competencies first. And then we're going to get a little bit into the practices that we can all incorporate in our daily lives around skill building, knowing that emotional intelligence is absolutely a skill, a muscle that we can flex and strengthen. And I want to offer up some skills that all of us can work on. And then I'm going to close the webinar today with a different perspective, and that's getting into a little bit of the critical thinking side of the problem with too much emotional intelligence. Like, is that possible to have too much emotional intelligence, and how that might show up in our workplaces? All right. And yes, Rachel, we will be handing out the slides to everyone along with the recording and along with some additional resources for all of you to dig into at your own time. Okay, we're going to keep going. And so, yeah, so this here is the framework I want to offer you that describes a bit more about the emotional intelligence domains. And this is really supporting, and this is digging more into the work of, what's his name? Daniel Goleman, yes, who's been around for a long time. He was the one of the first to be talking about emotional intelligence in a popular way. And the way he describes it is that he puts emotional intelligence skills into these four big buckets or domains. And he also breaks down each of these domains into 12 specific intelligence competencies. So we're going to be navigating this a little bit together right now, and we're going to break these down one by one. And if you notice, the skills that are listed on the top, self-awareness, self-management, these are all skills related to that intrapersonal realm. So anything related to ourselves, noticing what's happening in ourselves, how we manage ourselves. And then the next two domains, social awareness and relationship management, this gets into some of the things you all mentioned in the chat about, noticing and observing the differences of what is happening with emotions of those that are around you. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that interpersonal skill development too. Okay, so these are the 4 domains, and I'm going to walk you through them one by one. So stick with me. There's a lot of language and jargon and vocab in the next few slides, but please do, if you do have questions in the chat, Judy already offered that. Please do add your questions in the chat, and we'll get through as many as we can. Okay, so let's dig into this first one. Self-awareness. So a lot of you talked about this, mentioned in the chat that emotional intelligence is knowing yourself, being aware of your own emotions, and that is absolutely it. And this really gets to your ability to understand, to name, to recognize what's going on with you. How are you feeling and why? And the more that you can get to that big, colorful spectrum, that emotions wheel that I shared earlier, the better that you can name what's going on, the more you can really learn about like why things are happening, right? And you can get really deep into the accuracy of your self-assessment. So self-awareness is also about being able to recognize your own strengths, your own limitations, and it's also related to your self-confidence and self-worth. Okay, so this is all in the realm of self-awareness. And if we keep going to self-management, this is where, once we have all that information about naming how we're feeling, what is going on with ourselves, then we're at this choice point of, now what do we do with it? How do we want to act upon or not act upon these emotions that we're currently feeling? So these skills of self-management are related to self-control, impulse control. Maybe you have an emotion of anger and you're driving on 270 like I was last night. And, what is the appropriate way to manage that in that moment? And then adaptability is also related to self-management. And this is really related to your skill at shape shifting, at, being able to read the room and decide, what is appropriate in this moment, what is not appropriate in this moment. How are you managing yourself when you're in a group of friends versus if you are in a job interview, meeting, a potential boss for the first time. So that adaptability and navigating that is really critical. And then the achievement orientation and positive outlook, this is to say that, how are you setting a standard for excellence for yourself so that you are always learning, always improving, always trying to understand a little bit more about how you are doing. So you are seeing yourself in that achievement orientation. Okay. Whew, we're going to keep going. There's 2 more to get through. This next one is now getting to the interpersonal skills. And that's where we're really starting to think about our relationship with others, our impact of our words and our behaviors, and being able to recognize how we are showing up to other people. Empathy is so important with that, and organizational awareness is so important with that. And if I could break down organizational awareness just a little bit, this is your ability to better understand networks and also what's happening in your organization. How are you navigating the politics and influences of power in your organization? That's all related to organizational awareness. Okay, now we're getting through the last one, and that is relationship management. And this is sort of you could say it's like the culmination of all of those skills put together. And so some of these skills that are listed here are a little bit more complicated. For example, relationship management is also related to your ability to strategically influence and move others and change others' behavior. It's your ability to effectively coach and mentor others. And it's also your ability to proactively and effectively resolve conflict in a way that's collaborative, in a way that's productive. So a lot of these skills like teamwork, collaboration, inspirational leadership, this is all related to this bucket, this domain of relationship management. Okay, I know I'm talking a lot, we're going through a lot. And if we keep going, I just want to show again all 4 domains on one screen so you can think about it. And I want to ask you, as we're going through this pretty quickly, are you noticing that you are really good at one versus another? And this question I have here for all of you is, which domain in particular do you need to develop and strengthen in your performance every day? And that can be your performance as a leader in the environmental education network that you serve. That could be your performance as a colleague in a small nonprofit. So how are you thinking about this? Like, where are you feeling like you really could lean into more of that skill development? Okay, I'm getting a lot of comments on self-management. Getting a lot of self-management for sure. That's pretty funny. Yep, Gwen is also joining the self-management team. Relationship management, that's right. Okay, and Christine is also saying, social awareness might be a domain that Christine would like to build on. Good. Ooh, lots of self-awareness. So that's great. Very good. And so I think, the first step at, building these skills is really doing that accurate self-assessment of where do you really need to strengthen. Okay, so let's go to the flip side of that question, and that is, which domain are you the best at? And is there one idea or one, practice, some tip that you would like to share with everybody here today? And we're going to do this a little bit differently. Carrie's going to help me share a link in the chat here. Oh, thank you, Carrie. I already did it. So there's a link in the chat that Carrie shared that says contribute to the Padlet responses. And if you could go ahead and head over to that link, and I'm going to meet you there in just a second. I'm going to stop sharing and see if I can bring up my Padlet link too. And it looks like folks are already adding, which thank you. You guys are so good. So this Padlet it's a way for us to document some practices and ideas that you might want to share with your colleagues here. And here I want you to think about, what is your emotional intelligence domain superpower, and what tip or best practice do you want to share with others? And if you just navigate over to one of these domains, self-awareness, self-management, relationship management, and if you click that plus button, looks like a lot of you have already figured that out. Click that plus button. So I'm just going to demo this while you all are working. I'm going to click this plus button. I'm going to go to self-management, or no, self-awareness. And you can add more information in the subject line, journal practice. And I'm going to say, daily writing, free writing. And I'm just writing daily writing, free writing to identify my emotions. And if you want, you can add a photo, a link if you have a resource that you just absolutely love, or anything else. You can do an image search. I'll do that real quick and do journal practice. Oh, look, and I get a nice picture of a journal and some coffee. And when you're ready, make sure you click that publish button. And so that practice will show up here. If people have questions about that, please do drop them in the chat and we'll help you. I just want to see some of these superpowers and tips or best practices. All right, we've got some yoga prayer routines for self-management. Yeah, someone else also added journaling, mindful breathing throughout the day. Lots of spending time in nature. And as some of you already discovered, you can add hearts to any of the practices that you absolutely love. And you can also add a comment. If you want to add a comment, add your own resource that's related. Okay, let's head over to self-awareness. We've got a body scan as mindful meditation, taking a walk in nature, got some hearts. I'm going to add another heart to that too. Oh, I like this practice. 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you feel, 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste. That's a great one. I've been able to do that a few times, and that really is a wonderful practice that takes just a couple of minutes and it really focuses your attention on those things. So thank you for sharing that. What else do we have? Ooh, we've got some, let's head over to relationship management. We've got a book, Crucial Conversations. I haven't heard of that one. I'll have to check that out. Conflict management, the story in my head approach. If you wrote that, if you could add in the comment a little bit more about that, the story in my head approach. I'm curious to hear more about that. Finding common ground. Restorative justice mediation. Wonderful. Look at all of these comments. So it looks like there are, gosh, lots and lots of comments here, what people suggest as their best tips or practices. And this will stay a living document. So please keep adding to this. And if you ever have an extra minute in your day and you want to say, you know, I could love some self-management tips. Well, let me see if I can mine some ideas from that webinar. Head back over here and see what you can find. Oh, I love this one. Asking for help. That is so important I wish I could do lots of hearts for that. I think asking for help, you know, in terms of that self-management, I think is so key that you aren't, you know, you're not burdened with the idea of you have to do everything by yourself. But when do you feel okay to be a little bit vulnerable, seeking support from those that are closest to you? So whoever added that, thank you. That is wonderful. Okay. I don't have the time to go through all of these, but please, y'all, take a moment to appreciate all the different ideas that came from this group. Very nice. Okay. So I'm gonna head back over to Zoom now and go back to sharing my screen if I can. So thank you for that, for doing that exercise with me. And it is actually pretty cool to think about. You know, you really do have some superpowers when it comes to some of these skills that we're talking about, and you've got a lot that you can share with each other. So very cool to see that. We are going to keep going. And we're going to be focusing on this idea that, you know, emotional intelligence is a practice. Right? I've been saying this since the top of the hour, and you all have been sharing your best awesome tips and practices. And indeed, emotional intelligence is a practice. I said earlier that this is a muscle that you can flex, that you can strengthen, and it's also a muscle that can atrophy. So I don't know if you were like me, like when we were all working from home and not getting a lot of that social in-person interaction, I was a little bit, you know, forgetting about what's appropriate behavior in person and my manners and what is, you know, what is appropriate office interaction. So having to relearn some of that is totally normal and okay. And it's something that we want to build and practice on a regular basis. So yes, emotional intelligence is absolutely a practice. And the first practice I want to mention here comes from the work of Emma Seppala, and she wrote this book called Sovereign. And she talks about these 3 exercises that you can do to boost your emotional intelligence. And these are all exercises that are based in research. And this first one is related to, you know, tapping into your self-awareness. And this practice you can have to really build that self-awareness. And it's a little bit related to, you know, I saw in that Padlet a comment about a body scan or doing that thoughtful meditation. So this is actually going into that direction. So this first step of tapping into your self-awareness, this is something that you can do in just 2 minutes, where you notice the state of your body. Are you feeling tension or pressure or even relaxation in any parts of your body? How are your shoulders feeling? How's that, you know, space between your eyebrows? Are your teeth clenched? Are your hands clenched? So it's a quick exercise, a body scan from top to bottom of how it is that you're feeling and where you might be holding some tension. This next bullet is about, you know, taking note of your thoughts and their traffic level. And this traffic level means, so if you were to think about, thoughts are in your mind are like cars. Every single thought is a car, represents a car. So would you describe your mind as, beltway traffic during rush hour with lots of cars, lots of noise? Or is your mind state right now more of a slow one car meander on a country road? Or maybe you're somewhere in the middle of that. And then this next bullet is about noticing your emotions. How are you feeling? What can you name? And can you push yourself to name an emotion that is not just something like, oh, I'm happy or sad, but going back to that color wheel of emotions that I showed in the beginning, can you take a more nuanced approach to how it is you are thinking and feeling? Okay, so this is just exercise number 1, tapping into your self-awareness in just 2 minutes. This next exercise I want to bring up is all about breathing and what you can do to self-regulate with just your breath. And in this book, Emma Stepala talks about how breathing exercises are the most effective and the fastest way to handle your emotions in absolute real time. And how you can do that is by doing your best to lengthen your inhales and lengthen your exhales. And at first you want to match so that the inhale and the exhale is roughly equivalent. And then as you get deeper in the seconds, maybe in the second minute, you want to lengthen your exhale as long as you can. And we say that because inhaling increases your heart rate, and then exhaling decreases your heart rate. It taps into that parasympathetic nervous system that brings you at rest. So this is something that you can do. Doesn't matter where you are, what time of day it is. If you know you're about to walk into a stressful meeting, or if you're about to have a stressful conversation with a colleague, or give someone stressful feedback, take 2 minutes and do this breathing exercise. All right. The third tip that you can do is create these small moments of joy, or what I like to call joy snacks. So joy snacks are pretty cool because you really can't overindulge on joy snacks like you can with other types of snacks. And this is just to get you thinking about, who do you surround yourself with, and also how are you showing up for other people? So I think we can all identify people that we interact with on a regular basis that just doesn't matter if it's 30 seconds or 30 minutes, they just bring you down. They can drain you. It can make you feel probably not as happy as you were when you first started the conversation. I think we all know people like that. And hopefully you all know someone who does the exact opposite for you, that you can talk to them for a minute or 30 minutes if you're lucky, and it just uplifts you so much. And the idea there is that the way that you interact with other people absolutely can have an immediate impact to their own emotions. So I encourage you, challenge you to see, are there places where you can be that positive joy snack for somebody else? And whether that's through a smile to someone that you just see when you're outside walking your dog, or a neighbor that you can have a conversation with, or a compliment, as long as it is an authentic interaction, research shows that you are not only making them feel better, but you're also making yourself feel better. Okay, so this is one of my favorite practices, is these joy snacks, because it can be so easy and it can be so accessible, and you can do it anytime. Right? So find those joy snacks, y'all. All right. I'm going to shift gears a little bit now and talk about how to deal with difficult people. And oops, did I not share? Did I stop screen sharing?
Nope, looks good.
Oh, you can still see my slides? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just going over to the chat and Laura's saying I'm going to ask for joy snacks. Yes. And yes, Gwen, I'm hungry too. I'm going to have some joy snacks right after this. So if you are dealing with difficult people, and I do want to say that a number of these questions did come up in the registration chat about, what do I do if I have a difficult boss, or I have this difficult manager, or I have, these difficult colleagues? What do I do in this situation? And I have this here, a hint, it's not about them, but it's about you and everything that you can do to influence that situation. And so here I'm going to be sharing the work of Tony Schwartz, part of the Energy Project, also the author of The Way We're Working Isn't Working. And Tony offers these different lenses that we can experiment with that will help us deal with these difficult people, but also see the difficulties in a different light. And these are all things that you absolutely can control yourself. He does say that, we're always using different lenses to filter reality, and we do this all the time. As we are walking out in the world, as we're interacting with people, we are always using different lenses to see what is happening and to interpret what is happening. And we have a choice to make here, especially when we are dealing with difficult people. And so I want to offer these 3 different lenses, practices that we can take into consideration when we are running into those difficult people in our lives. And this first lens is called realistic optimism. This is one of my favorites. And this is a term coined by psychologist Sarah Schneider from the University of South Florida. And she defines realistic optimism as telling yourself the most hopeful and empowering story about the given circumstance without subverting the facts. Okay, so we're not saying look for alternative facts. We are saying take the absolute truth. What are the facts? But also think about, what is the story that you tell yourself from the facts that you're given? And is there another story that you can say that paints the other person in a more compassionate light? So if you can show up in the best way in any given situation, how would you like to show up? Right? So that's what realistic optimism is. It gives yourself a way to stand outside of a situation versus falling victim to just reacting, right? So you get a chance to choose the story that you want to tell yourself. And one fun one that I want to share is one that I bring up with my spouse a lot. If we're in traffic and someone cuts us off, and I feel like drivers these days are just getting worse, or maybe I'm just getting old, but I will say to myself, well, maybe he's driving to the hospital and his wife's in labor and he's just got to get to the hospital on time. So the fact is that somebody did cut you off and they're speeding and they're driving like crazy, but the stories, and maybe they have a good reason for driving like crazy. So just a silly example of where you can incorporate a little bit of realistic optimism. This next lens is called the reverse lens. And this is another practice where you are really putting yourself into the other person's shoes and asking, what is this other person feeling and in what ways does it actually make sense, right? So if you have a person on your team or on your staff that just absolutely gets under your skin and triggers you in some way and just frustrates you, one way to think about it is to take that reverse lens of like, is this person feeling frustrated too? And do they have um, is there any value to what it is that they're feeling? And to take it a step further, what's my responsibility in all of this? How am I contributing to that person's reaction to me, right? So this reverse lens should sound a lot like empathy, right? So I share this slide as like as a separate slide here because I want to acknowledge that this practice of empathy and showing empathy to others can be really hard. And so I just want you to, if you could share in the chat if any of this is resonating with you. Do you find that finding empathy with people who just frustrate you, anger you, the people in your life that can just, touch all of the wrong buttons, can it be hard to find empathy with them? And my answer to that is yes, it can be really hard, especially when you're dealing with heightened emotions, you're responding really quickly. It can be really hard. So just want to acknowledge that I am offering you some tools here, but these aren't always easy to put into practice. And like, where can you find the small steps to do this work? Because it can be quite hard. All right, we're going to keep going to the third lens. And this is the lens of the long view, right? So maybe you're in a situation where you really are dealing with a difficult, chronically toxic person. They're a bully, and that's just the reality. There's no other way to frame it. There's no other way to, put an empathetic spin on it. Some people are just, downright mean, and you just have to deal with it. What do you do in that moment? Sometimes the only thing you can do is take this long-term approach, the long lens, or ask yourself the question of, even though I'm in this difficult scenario, how can I still learn and grow from this experience? I know this can be really hard too. And then another way of thinking about it is, how will you feel a week from now, a month from now? And I think we all have examples we can draw on where, one moment just seemed to be critically important in that moment. But if you look back months later, just not, it seemed to be like a trivial interaction. So if you're able to just take that pause and say, will this matter, a day from now, a year from now, that might give you the perspective and the time that you need to have that compassion with this person that really is just, a problem. Okay. So I want to just take a pause here and see if there are any questions that Judy and Carrie are seeing in the chat. I'm no longer able to see the chat, so I can't see if there's any questions, but any questions that we can talk through now before I keep going?
So, Anne, lots of really good comments in the chat,
Oh, okay.
and really good discussions. One question that came up was, how do you handle if your boss is the difficult one with, low IQ, well, not low IQ, low
Maybe low
emotional
IQ too.
intelligence? No, what are some strategies or tips for what you might do?
Judy, that's a hard one, but I think there's probably a combination of, doing that breath work, recognizing what are some of the things that your boss does that absolutely infuriate you, that trigger you? Are there certain circumstances where it's like your weekly meeting, it's a stressful occurrence for you? Is there anything that you can do to fill that emotion bank, whether that's through breath work or journaling, or what can you do to calm the heart rate, bring the heart rate down through breathing, that exercise of, what do you see, what do you hear, what do you smell? I think that calming before you walk into that moment can be critical so that you're already in a place of calm. But then, sometimes with a difficult boss, you might have to take that long view, right? And, how are you still learning and growing from working with this difficult person? How are you still contributing to your expertise and your professionalism? Like thinking about the skills that you're able to build because you have this practice with this difficult boss. So that's a tough one, but I would say, really important to anticipate those moments with these folks, and how are you in a better mindset when you walk into those moments, and then that practice of taking the long view. But
And
that's a hard
and
one.
Anne, Stephanie made a point of with the bully in the workplace, which is sometimes what the boss is. And
Ugh,
one thing that I've learned is you have to, if it's really a tense situation, take yourself out of it. I have to go to the restroom. I have to take a break. I need to get some water. You just take yourself out at the moment before it degrades. So there are a
yeah.
lot of bullies, unfortunately. Thanks, Anne.
Yeah, good questions, and keep them coming. And thank you for that, Judy. And I think part of this work too is recognizing you really can't change other people, but absolutely whatever you can do to de-escalate something like that, getting yourself physically from that situation, avoidance can work. But if it's people that you have to interact with, that's a tough one. But my advice would really be thinking about the long lens. How are you taking learning? How are you appreciating that you are building skills for conflict resolution? How are you using that moment as a case study in the chapters? If you think about your career as this book with multiple chapters, this could be your, difficult chapter to learn from in the future. Okay, I'm trying to keep track of time. I've got one more resource I want to share with all of you. And this is getting into a bit of a critical approach to emotional intelligence and asking all of you about, is there a downside? Is there a downside to too much emotional intelligence? And so I wanted to touch on this because it is a body of work that is not as widely explored as the positives of emotional intelligence, of which there are many. But just want to end with this and thinking about where emotional intelligence, like having too much, may trip us up. And so I'm going to be sharing a little bit about the work from Thomas Chamorro Premusic and Adam Yearsley. And they offer just some different perspectives of emotional intelligence. And so I'm curious to hear what y'all think about this. Okay, so this first one is an example of an imaginary person in the workplace. So I'll just give you a minute to read it. So want to ask you about Gemma. She sounds pretty awesome. She sounds pretty awesome to me. And I want to ask y'all, who wouldn't want to hire someone like Gemma? And is higher emotional intelligence always beneficial? So I want to hear what y'all think about that. And I can't see the chat. So if Judy and Carrie, if you see something you want to point out, please say so out loud. Just want to note that, Gemma sounds pretty awesome, sounds pretty amazing. She's upbeat, remains positive, even with bad news. Her colleagues love her. She's a beacon of calm, never loses her cool. So in many ways, she's the ideal employee, and anyone who has a brain would absolutely want to have someone like Gemma on their team. And so I'm just going to provide a bit of a different outlook of where some of these traits might trip somebody up like Gemma in the workplace.
And there are a lot of thoughts in the chat of
Oh,
things
yeah?
like,
Okay.
that she might be high maintenance. It's definitely hard to manage expectations like Gemma's. That was
Yeah.
Laura. This
Yeah.
sounds like potential for burnout from
Mm.
Sarah. Just, is this real? Is she real? From Susan. So there are a lot of comments in the chat.
Is she real? That's funny. Thank you for that, Judy. And so just want to offer a few perspectives of where this kind of positive attitude might be a little bit difficult. And one of these areas is in the realm of creativity and innovation, right? So there's this growing body of work on personality psychology research that's finding this, negative correlation between emotional intelligence and different traits that are associated with creativity and innovation. So just think about, the character in your mind of the creative artist that is moody and is hot and cold and impulsive and angry and hostile, but they're really creative and they're innovative and they do all these cool things. So in some ways that's a caricature, but this research is showing that correlation. And if we look at some of the traits associated with creativity, these are traits that are often antisocial, or people that are too driven, ambitious, hostile, impulsive, nonconformism. And so that is just something to think about. And this is not to say that if you have high EQ that you can't be also a creative person. It's just saying the tendency for higher EQ is that you are really seeking uh, that conformism, that everyone gets along, and you might not really be in that space of creativity and innovation, but you may need to be coached to get there. Okay. And this next thing I want to bring up is that folks with high emotional intelligence may have difficulty giving and receiving feedback. And this might not be a surprise to you. You know, if you care about your colleagues and you are sensitive to their feelings and you're empathetic, you might not want to hurt people's feelings. And it might be hard to deliver hard news or critical feedback, negative feedback. And you really are more focused on the relationship, or you don't want to damage the relationship versus, getting ahead. And this shows up in a lot of ways where, leaders who might have to make hard, unpopular decisions when they really care so much about their team being happy. This can show up. So again, people with high emotional intelligence doesn't mean that you are ultimately bad at giving and receiving feedback, but these are things that you have to consider. Okay, so I'm curious to hear if this is resonating with any of you too. And this last thing I want to mention is related to risk taking. And this is really, I don't know, I really see myself in this because I'm kind of risk averse too, if I can be perfectly honest. So there is a growing or a high correlation between high emotional intelligence and high levels of conscientiousness. And what this typically means is that if you have high conscientiousness, you have greater self-control, greater impulse control. You're not going to be out there taking these risks if you don't have to, right? So, and if this shows up in extreme ways, it might be a little bit more counterproductive. You might be leaning more towards perfectionism, risk avoidance, so that you don't do that crazy thing that you're not sure you're going to succeed or not. So this may show up in some folks that have high emotional intelligence. And so I want to just hear from some of you if that's resonating with any of you, that aversion to risk. And I say all these things and I bring it up because that the real importance in this work is trying to find that balance, right? And I have a picture of a gymnast with a balance beam here because I'm still high off of the Summer Olympics in Paris. But I wanted to just emphasize that we all need people on our work teams, on our workplaces that have high emotional intelligence. But I also wouldn't discount the value of those lower EQ folks because we need the nonconformists. We need the unconventional, the lower EQ folks to push us a little bit, to think beyond the status quo and to challenge our thinking a little bit. So, but I still want to say there is undoubtedly, everyone would agree how important EQ is, the importance of emotional intelligence, but wanted to make sure that we are seeking that balance in everything that we do. Okay, I think that's it that I've got. Do we want to go to questions or Judy, Carrie, what
And
should we
we're
do?
almost out of time, but that
Yeah.
was fantastic. There are a lot of questions in the chat. And I don't know if you'll have a chance to answer all of them, but maybe if you'd help us answer a few of them that we
Sure,
might be able
sure,
to
sure.
post later. But I'll just give you one and then we can wrap up. But thank you
Okay.
all for putting the questions in and also just your thoughts about, Camila talked about toxic positivity. There were questions about how do you apply emotional intelligence from Andy in different settings? How do I show empathy with a coworker who denies to my face that there isn't a problem, however,
Mm.
shares with others that there are problems on the team? So maybe you can answer a few of these and we'll send it out. You don't have to do it right now because you'll probably need to think about it. But that was fantastic, Anne.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so, so much. We all need this. And someone said if somebody has issues to send them a recording of this. I think that was Laura of this webinar. And yes, Harrison, this is being recorded. Everybody will get a copy of this. And Anne, maybe we can answer a few of those questions and send them out to everyone
Yeah, for
because you
sure.
have such good thoughts on this. Because just when we've worked together for 18 years, we've run into a lot of issues together and
Yes.
tried to help solve them. So thank you, thank you. And I think we're going to turn it over to Carrie to wrap it up in the last minute. Thank you, Anne, so much.
I agree. And this was amazing. And the interaction with everyone is just fantastic. I think we all are ready to keep exploring this and use some of those resources to ensure that we're able to keep growing our emotional intelligence. Well, I just want to wrap up really quickly with just a couple of notes here. As we've said repeatedly, everyone who is registered for the webinar is going to receive the recording. They're going to receive Anne's slide deck, any resources that she shared, and also the Zoom chat. So that will be in your inbox. It'll also be on the EE Pro post that you can see here. And speaking of EE Pro, a lot of you don't know what EE Pro is. It is our online digital community for professionals that work in environmental education. It is free. There are all sorts of groups. There's all sorts of opportunities, resources, and different ways to exchange what you've learned and how you can build your community. So we encourage you to visit our EE Pro community and see what's happening there, including more about this webinar. We also have our annual conference and research symposium coming up here in November. You can go to conference.nwaawe.org to learn more about it. It's happening in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania this year, and there are incredible keynotes, these wonderful pre-conference workshops. We have sessions on all sorts of topics, things like civic engagement and climate education, and all the different ways that we can incorporate all different aspects of environmental education into our work. So we encourage you to check it out. Share it with your networks because it is an opportunity to meet with hundreds and hundreds of others that are doing similar work. And then from there, we'd love to know if there's anything that you'd like to learn in future webinars. I saw somebody asking a little bit more about how we are in tough times these days when it comes to our planet, when it comes to education. And so if there are themes or topics you'd like us to cover, we'd love for you to fill out this survey. Let us know what you learned today and let us know what we can keep bringing to you through our EE webinars. And before you take off, just wanted to say thank you again for joining us today. Thank you so much, Anne, for bringing so much education to the conversation around emotional intelligence. This was absolutely mind-blowing when it came to some of the different practices that we can use and all the different pieces that factor into emotional intelligence. So thank you so much for being part of this today and for everyone who joined. We can't wait to keep this conversation going through the resource sharing that we'll be doing and the learning that we all have to do as well. So thanks again.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, everyone, for joining. And Laura put in the chat, if you want another webinar, there's a NOAA one coming up on climate change. So, Anne, thank you so much.
That was fun. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Carrie.